served in the military for 30 years. During that 30 years, I saw things that were interesting, fascinating, and sometimes terrifying. But the day that will always stay with me is December 7th, 1941. I was a 19-year-old corporal. I was attached to the 8th Field Artillery. I was stationed at Schofield Barracks, Pearl Harbor. I was having breakfast in the mess hall at around 8:30 a.m. when several explosions occurred. At first, none of us were too concerned about the explosions. Some commented, "It sounds like the Air Force is having a little target practice." The explosions continued, and I walked to the front of the patio archway that faced the quadrangle. It was there for the first time that I heard the sound of the low-flying aircraft. The plane drew near, and I looked up, and I saw its red circles marking its wings while its fuselage was cutting loose with its roaring machine guns. The first plane that strafed us came in so low, I could see the pilot's silhouette in the cockpit. Bullets began ricocheting off of the asphalt driveway, off of cement walls, off of the barracks, even off of metal bunks and the wall lockers that were in the buildings. Many men were hit, and they fell both inside and outside of the quadrangle. Already, a line of soldiers had formed. They streamed into the aid station with those in tow that had been wounded in the attack. Blood ran down the entrance to the aid station. It formed in a puddle on the floor. Now, many men were hit when they ran outside to see what was going on. The initial machine gunning of our troops took a terrible toll. While they contemplated the reality of the situation, the Japanese had attacked. Now, having heard the bugle call, I left and I ran back to our barracks. And word was passed to the troops that we should arm ourselves. I drew my .45 caliber pistol and a box of ammunition. This pistol was the one that was assigned to us that were in the military. I stuffed mine in my shirt. Also in our gun room, there were 7 Springfield single-action rifles and a number of Browning automatic rifles. These rifles were passed out first, and the men that received them were set outside or up on the roof of the barracks to fire at the planes as they passed overhead. Unfortunately, I didn't see any success from their endeavors. Although the Japanese planes fired thousands of machine gun rounds at us, no bombs were dropped on us, and no fires were set in our area. Having said that, 9 of our men were killed, and 16 were wounded. Now, I made it back to my barracks, and I ran inside, and I grabbed my ready bag, and also a barracks bag, into which I put an extra change of clothes. It was in a blanket, just as we had been taught in practice. I headed for the motor pool. On the way there, we came across the company mascot. The poor dog was lying in a pool of its own blood. One of its hind legs had been shot off. One of the soldiers drew his pistol and ended the dog's suffering. We got to the motor pool and we filled our wire truck full of communications equipment. All the while, I could still hear the Japanese planes strafing our base. The orders came for the trucks to form up in the parade grounds, and we were then told to disperse so we would not be an easy target for the Japanese planes while we awaited our orders. My orders came about 30 minutes later. I was to go to Fort DeRussy, which was my pre-assigned wartime location. En route to Fort DeRussy, we passed by Hickam Field. It was engulfed in smoking flames. The planes, the hangars, the barracks, they were all a scene of utter devastation. Pearl Harbor was a mess. Ships were leaning. Ships were on fire. Ships had capsized. Oil, smoke, and flames obscured my vision everywhere that I looked. We made it to Fort DeRussy, We took our switchboard and we set it up in a locker room underneath some athletic seats. I then drove to the top of the punch bowl, which was a place where we were going to make our final communications. This was also the place where the observers would look out, also on top of the Royal Hawaiian Hotel. When those final connections were made, I left the soldier in charge until the artillery observer could arrive. Once the artillery was set up, we were ready to defend against the Japanese, provided we had enough ammunition. The rumor had it, we only had enough for 3 hours worth of firing. Now, there was nothing to do but wait. That night, there were a number of explosions. We were sure that the Japanese were trying to set up a beachhead on Waikiki. Later on, there were more explosions, and we thought that the Japanese perhaps had sent more planes to bomb Honolulu, that a plane had dropped its bombs on the city. We heard later that perhaps more bombs came off of Diamond Head. In 12 days, it will be 70 years since the attack on Pearl Harbor. I learned things that day that have stayed with me until this very day. I learned how precious life is and how easy it is to die. An old soldier who's 90 years old today and with us in the audience thanks you for listening to his story.